Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Sydney Cross. Make sure you can hear me. Make sure I'm not unmuted. Yes, okay. So I'm Sydney Cross, and I work in the Hamilton Advancement Office. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Welcome to Well-Designed and Organized, 3 Professionals Tips and Tricks. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. This event is being recorded, and you all will be muted throughout the presentations just to eliminate background noise. If you do have a question, please type it in the chat. My colleague Sarah Ziesnitz, Class 2000, and I will be monitoring the chat window. So type your questions, and while our presenters are speaking, we'll be monitoring that. And once their formal remarks are finished, we'll turn to questions from the chat. Sarah, I'll turn it over to you for the introductions.
Great, thank you. And I apologize if you hear popcorn popping in the background. It is bribery for my children. But welcome everyone, and thank you again for joining this evening's event. I'm Sarah Ziesnitz, Class of 2000, and a member of Hamilton's Advancement Office. I'm excited to welcome our presenters, the 3 fabulous women joining us from the Class of 2000. Thank you, Avery, Jessie, and Carol for presenting this evening. Avery Amante, a professional organizer, will kick us off with tips on how to decide what to prioritize in your space and how to curate your belongings. As you may recall from Avery's bio, Avery is a professional organizer who works hands-on with clients in their homes to help them simplify their space and their lives. Before starting her own business, she spent 15 years working for an educational, travel, and cultural exchange company. Her focus was on customer service, program quality, and operational efficiency. In 2015, she launched her business, Simply Organized. Her work with clients involves collaboratively building solutions that will help them save time, reduce stress, find greater peace of mind, and feel great about their space. We could all use that. So without further ado, we're going to turn it over to Avery. So Avery, if you want to unmute yourself.
Great. Yes. Can you hear me? Thumbs up. Great. Hi, everybody. It's so fun to see some familiar faces and such a broad range of classes and some parents. So thanks for being here. Actually 2 of my college roommates are on the call as well and can attest to the fact that my organizing love has dated back to my Hamilton days of trying to keep a dorm room with 3 other people in order. And I've made it the way that I earn a living, and I love it, and I'm really excited to talk to you about some of the sort of things and principles I've learned over the last several years. Home organizing is, of course, a really broad term, and goals and needs are different for everyone. There is no one-size-fits-all model to the approach or to the outcome. It really varies widely based on your space, your family, your time, your work, and personal preference. But in my work, I really concentrate on 2 basic principles that do apply universally when striving to create more order and more organization in my clients' homes. The first is a focus on functionality. So really being able to find things easily and, as importantly, put them away easily, and having space to cook, work, play, relax, without being overly encumbered with stuff, feeling like you can really use your space and enjoy being in your space. So I'm always reminding my clients that our goal in each session is to create greater ease of functionality and greater peace of mind when you're in your home. We've all had a lot of time in our homes these days, so it's extra important. The second, which I'm going to focus on today, is understanding your relationship with your things in order to make the right choices for you. So Carol and Jessie are going to talk in a few minutes about design and how to style areas of your home. But I think before you can really think about how to display your things, you need to give some thought as to what you're displaying and what purpose those things are serving in your home and your life. So most things we need in our home fall into 3 basic categories. They are functional, they are aesthetic, and they provide comfort, both physical and emotional. Some things fall into all categories. Some things are just one. So take a second, since we're all at home, and just look around you real quick and see if you can sort of categorize some of the things in your space around you. Do they fit into one category, all categories? That's functional, aesthetic, and things that provide physical and emotional comfort. So of course, in looking around, you might be identifying some things that fall into none of these categories. So for example, when I was sitting at my desk putting together some thoughts for today, I noticed a scented candle that has been sitting there for ages. And I sort of pontificated on that a little bit and realized I don't use scented candles anymore. The thing wasn't particularly pretty in any way, and it certainly doesn't provide me with any comfort. So it's gone. So take a moment now, another moment, and look around you and see if you can identify one thing that doesn't fall into one of these categories. Once you have, I want you to think about whether or not you can easily make the decision to part with it. And this is where things can get a little dicier. Much of our decision making goes a little deeper into our psyche and can actually be really hard to make the call to part with that candle or whatever item you've just identified. So the next step of connecting with your belongings is thinking about why we keep certain things and why we don't. Some reasons are productive, meaning they enhance our lives and our well-being in some way. And I put these into three main categories: necessity, joy, and meaning. Necessity is not completely straightforward. Sometimes we use the word need a little too readily. So I know some of you out there might be wandering the aisles of Home Goods when it reopens, and there are going to be things that you need, like a new stainless steel to-go wine tumbler. By the way, if you're trying to reduce your stuff, please stay away from Home Goods. I have clients that I have banned from that store. It's just, they make everything way too tempting, and it's way too easy to accumulate a lot of stuff. I've had this discussion many times with clients. Necessity isn't, though, just the things that we can't live without. It does include the things that make our lives simpler and more manageable. So for example, I can make rice in an all-purpose pot that has lots of functions, but I choose to commit the real estate and my cabinets for a rice maker because it makes dinner time easier. So can I live without it? Sure. Do I choose to keep it because the necessity is my sanity when I'm trying to get dinner quickly on the table for 4 children? Yes. Joy is actually is the next one, and that's a word that has become kind of widely associated with home organizing in the age of Marie Kondo. But it's an important one, and it takes many forms, I think. Joy includes things that we just like to look at because they're pretty. Some of the things that Carol and Jessie will be talking about are things that bring joy, the things that we use to make our homes look nice, which in turn makes us happy and makes our space an enjoyable place to be in, which is important. Things with meaning. Sorry, I just skipped ahead here. So joy it takes a lot of forms, and it can be a treasure that you picked up on a trip. It can be your favorite sweatshirt. It can be your favorite kitchen tool. So there's lots of things that are functional, that are aesthetic, and that provide comfort, that also bring us joy, and that's why we keep them. Meaning is the third category, and things with meaning are the things that represent who we are. They're the things that we keep in our lives because they spark memories, they remind us of loved ones, or because they are aspirational. This category is really broad: pictures and picture frames, a box of childhood memories that's tucked away in your basement, a chair that's so old that no one is allowed to sit in it, and I am guilty of having 1 or 2 of these in my house, much to my husband's dismay. Books actually often fall into this category, and Carol and Jessie are both going to touch on book display. And books have this great combination of things that can be very meaningful because they often correlate them with accomplishments. So I have kept over the years a couple of my my French books that were from my medieval French literature class my junior year of Hamilton, and I keep them because it's a badge of honor that I survived the course with Professor Kruger, if anyone else had her. Books are also memories. They're associations of certain times in our lives. They can be aspirational. And they can certainly be necessities as well as some things that brings us joy because they look beautiful displayed. So books is sort of is a category that actually some organizers really encourage paring down, and I think books serve so many purposes in our home. This isn't to say that there are some books that probably no longer belong on your bookshelf, such as, quick paperback cheapy read that you picked up for the beach. And that leads to our last topic, which is the unproductive reasons that we keep things in our lives. And these three things I categorize as obligation, guilt, and fear. Things that fall into these categories are the things that weigh us down. They're the things that make our space feel like it's not our own, or like being in our own space is stressful or angst-ridden. The first thing I mentioned is obligation. I cannot tell you how many clients have said things to me like, oh, I can't get rid of that. My grandmother gave it to me. And I ask follow-up questions like, do you have other things that your grandmother gave you that are more meaningful or that you like better? This can also include stuff that we think that we are supposed to have in our home. So I have one client who had a really hard time getting rid of a gravy boat. She doesn't host Thanksgiving. She never makes anything that includes gravy, but she felt like as an adult, she's supposed to have a gravy boat. So there are things that we feel like are supposed to be part of our space, and there's no right or wrong. Obligation can really weigh you down with your stuff. Gifts received is another big one in this category. The final one is guilt. Guilt can be keeping something that you paid too much for, that you feel like you need to keep to justify the purchase, hanging on to the illusion that it was worthwhile. Guilt can be not wanting to be wasteful. I had a client who sort of hoarded takeout containers because she felt so guilty about the waste and the plastic consumption. And meanwhile, they were avalanching out of her cabinet on a daily basis, kind of underscoring the stress and the guilt she felt about what she was using. They were not serving her in any way. They were adding to her stress tremendously. So into the recycling bin they went after a long discussion. She immediately felt lighter. And lastly, we have fear. Fear of the consequences of saying goodbye to something. What if I need it someday? What if my children might want this someday? I really encourage my clients to focus on kind of the over-under of keeping things out of fear. There are things we hold on to because we might possibly need them someday. And I'm always reminding people, if the chance is so remote and the cost or the time of replacing that item is reasonable or nominal, then it's not worth the space that it takes up in your home and in your brain. Everything around us is sort of consuming our mental space as well. I have a client who was keeping furniture that she had replaced in her home that she didn't really like anymore. She was keeping it stored in the corner of her garage in case she bought a bigger house someday and needed it. And she was tripping over the legs of an old coffee table every time she got out of her car. And it simply was such a remote possibility. And the cost of replacing these old items was not worth having an impact on her daily functioning. And we all have things that fall into these categories, me included, and I do this for a living. But when you can ask yourself the why, your ability to let go, and the peace you'll feel, or the peace you'll feel in choosing something for the right reasons, is absolutely worth it. There's no right or wrong answers for the things that you choose to assign meaning to, or the things you choose to let go because they aren't serving you. But I really think that thinking critically about the why behind your stuff is the first step to ensuring that your home is a place that you want to be in. And considering that we've all been home a lot these days, it should be a place that you feel good about being in. So please feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions, if you need words of encouragement for getting going on your own projects, and a cheerleader throughout the process. And thank you so much for listening.
Thanks so much, Avery. Great tips. I'm glad to know I don't need a gravy boat if it doesn't serve me. That's great advice, among many other things. So thanks so much. A reminder, if you have any questions, to please put them in the chat and keep them general, not what serves your specific space, but more generally what might help with interior design or organization, and Sarah and I will monitor that. So our next presenter is Jessie Sheehan. Prior to starting her business in 2018, Jessie spent over 11 years in commercial interior design at architectural firms in Boston, designing spaces for corporate interior, higher education, and hospitality clients. Her business, Jessie Sheehan Interiors, is an interior design studio based in South Natick, Massachusetts, that specializes in the residential design of elegant and livable interiors that are classic yet modern. Jessie enjoys working with families and finding ways to design a home that grows with them, while also being functional and beautiful. Known for her mixing of color and pattern, antiques and new furnishing, and high-end pieces with budget finds, Jessie creates spaces that reflect her casual, classic New England style. Now Jessie will give a demonstration on how to style an entry table and make design decisions to suit your space. Jessie, I'll ask you to unmute and take it away.
Am I big for everyone? Oh, here I am. Okay. I'm so glad to see so many familiar faces from the class of 2000. Tonight I am going to show you how to style a front hall table that I have here. Front hall tables make a statement when you first walk into someone's home, so it's important to showcase sort of the look and feel that you want your home to have when someone walks in and sees your front hall table. So the table that I have here, if you can see, is an antique table. I received this from my grandparents, so it has a lot of meaning for me. Front hall tables should be slightly higher in height so that they're not too low, so that they can display items right at arm's length. And they should also sort of occupy the front wall that sits opposite your door and anchors the wall. I also like to have mirrors in the front hall. It helps to reflect light and bounce light around the space and create some interest. If not a mirror, definitely having art over your front hall table is a nice piece just to occupy the wall and again, provide some color if the art has color. So for me, I have this piece, this mirror, which I've hung here, and I have the table. The thing that's already on the table is a lamp. Lighting is really important in the front hall. Not only does it provide interest, but it's a functional piece. You know, obviously it helps to provide lighting and mood lighting at night. The style of lamp can vary, but you definitely want to have a lamp that I would say is at least 2 feet tall, depending on how large your foyer is. This lamp I also inherited from my grandparents, so again, it has some meaning for me. So to style this table, basically I'm starting with a blank slate, but the first thing that I'm going to add in is some books. Like Avery talked, books are things that you may have lying around your house. I like to use coffee table style books, so they're hardcover books. I like to use ones that are relatively wide. You can choose your books based on their color and also their subject matter. I also, depending on what the book is, sometimes take the jacket off of the book. This book I actually bought at like a, I don't even know, it was like a thrift store, and it had an ugly tattered book jacket on it. So I took the book jacket off, and it actually creates just a really nice, clean, lined book. So that's one little trick as a designer, is you can reuse some of the books that you may have in your house simply by taking the jacket off of the book. So anyways, I have two books. They're neutral in color. My foyer is relatively neutral with pops of color. So I use these two books, I stack them. I like to find books that are relatively similar in width and height so that they line up and start a book stack. I'm sort of just placing them on the middle, and the purpose of having books on the table is just sort of to break up the table surface, provide some interest, also provide some height. So what I'm starting to do is create a center stack on the table. The next thing I'm going to put in is this bone inlay storage box. It's just a simple storage box, but it has sort of a graphic element to it, and I'm going to put it right on top of the other books. Again, this is just adding in a decorative item, but boxes like this that provide some storage are a good way of hiding things if you want to quickly put something away. As well as, I should have mentioned that I like having front hall tables that have drawers. That also really makes it easy to put something away or put something out of sight if you want. So the next element that I'm going to add in is what I typically have on my front hall table, and that's this. It's a faux orchid. So I'm not a huge fan of faux plants, but I will say there are a lot of really great faux plants out there these days. I think an orchid is a simple and elegant plant that you can always have out. It's sort of seasonless, so it can be out at, in the winter, or it could be out in the summer, and it doesn't really matter. The key to using a faux plant is to find a vessel that's really neutral. So a vessel that's white or maybe black or gray, nothing that has color or crazy texture. And then make sure that the filler inside underneath the leaves looks natural, or at least doesn't look like it's too brightly colored. And then again, with the blossoms, with the actual flowers, have ones that are open and then ones that are just buds. That will make it look organic and not look like it really is a faux plant. So anyways, I'm going to add that here on the side. Just tweak things, and that's sort of what sits on my foyer table every day. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute. I'm going to add in one more element, which is just a little small bowl. This is simply just a decorative item. Bowls, though, are a good catch-all. They're a good way of putting something in. You can put keys in if this was the area that you were coming in and out during the day, or you can put a small collection of something. I have shelves in here. So this just helps to fill out the table and provide just a decorative element. The shells I've collected with my children over the course of several years doing beach trips. So again, I like being able to look at that when I walk by. It just reminds me of fun times that I've had with my kids. So going back to the flowers, this is sort of every day, but if I happen to have some fresh cut flowers, I could put just a couple simple flower buds in a small vase and add that. And I'm actually just going to stick it right on top of the stack and add just a little pop of color. These are, I cut earlier today from my garden, but if I didn't have that, this display would look fine, and it would just sort of look simple, but having some fresh flowers does add to it. But if I want to actually use real flowers, which is a great thing to do now that floral shops, at least in Massachusetts, are open again, and it's summertime, I did go and buy some fresh flowers, and they're in the space here. So replacing the orchids with fresh flowers is a really nice way to do it. And I like to use a vase that has a similar height to the orchid, because you want to have some balance between the height of the lamp and whatever you have over here. It doesn't have to be symmetrical, but you do want to have some balance. And it's nice to have a flower that has a little bit of color to, again, add a little bit of pop in the space. So that's pretty much a snapshot of styling a front hall table. The basics are have a mirror or artwork, have some lighting, use some books to provide height, use either storage boxes or bowls to provide storage of things, and always have some flowers, whether they be faux or real.
Great. Thank you, Jessie. We did have a question from Trisha Woodward, class of 2000. And in terms of the lamp, if you can't do a lamp, what would you recommend for height? Plant or, you know, to counter maybe the plant, something else in place of the lamp?
You can't do a lamp because of not having no power, or is it because I will just say that they have come out with some really interesting and great looking cordless lamps that are actually, you plug it in, it has a battery to it. So if you don't have an electrical outlet right at your table, you can get these cordless lamps that they have out there. Modern Lantern is one of the companies that makes them. But if you can't have a lamp for other reasons, I think having some sort of decorative object, whether it be some sort of piece of sculpture or vase, something that has some height to it, that can balance out other things on the table.
Thank you, Jessie.
Yeah.
We have a couple of more questions that came into the chat, but we're going to save those until the very end so that all three of our presenters can weigh in. Our final presenter for the evening is Carol Lang. Carol began her design career in corporate interiors and worked for the #1 global design firm, where she designed and managed projects on 3 continents. After 10 amazing years on the corporate side, Carol founded Carol Lang Interiors in 2013. Since then, Carol has designed over 100 projects, many with repeat clients. In each, she worked to realize her clients' investment in their homes and businesses, solve their space problems, and add style and function. She brings years of experience, a careful eye, trade and vendor relationships, candor, and strong project management skills. And now Carol will showcase how to arrange bookshelves and discuss why some arrangements work better than others and how you can enhance the presentation of the things you love. Thank you, Carol.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Okay, so I am going to walk us through styling a shelf. And before we start, I do want to say I put this on my website at carollang.com, so you don't have to take notes if you're so inclined. But really the rules that we use for styling a shelf, just like Jessie said at the entry, are rules that apply everywhere in your house. So I'll be talking about scale and proportion and color. This is stuff that will give you kind of a visual on as I work on this one particular shelf, but you can extrapolate it to a bigger situation if you're thinking about a whole living room or a bathroom or a kitchen. So I'm going to get started. I have this kind of dinky, awkward shelf in my home office. It has 3 shelves. And before we start, I just want to say, I tell my clients, you have to do a little self-introspection before you get started with the design project. You have to know what you like to live with, how much you want to spend, what your preferences are in terms of having, in particular with shelves, lots of stuff, a little bit of stuff. If you're a book person, if you like it to look really clean, I will candidly admit I am not a minimalist. I sometimes wish I were. It doesn't work for me. So I like stuff, I like books. So I'm going to style this the way I would style it for my house. You may look at it and think, I would do it differently. That's totally cool. Design is so personal. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. So we're going to get started. We have 4 steps to get through styling a shelf. The first is you take everything off. So you empty your shelves out and you kind of see what the bones are. You see what you're working with. I have narrow shelves, both narrow in width and they're shallow. They have fixed shelves and I have 3 different options. I have a tall shelf and then 2 smaller shelves at the bottom. So I have to think about the proportion of the shelves before I get started and think what will work best in those sizes. So first thing, everything out. Second thing you're going to do is once you've taken everything out, you're going to go back to what Avery told you and you're going to follow her directions. You're going to sort stuff. You're going to look at what the things are that you absolutely want to see every day, that you love, that you couldn't live without. and you're going to prioritize those. So because we're doing this in a quick little, vignette, I've already done that. So I have everything ready to go back in. And the third thing we're going to do then, step 3, is to put your kind of anchor objects, your base objects. For me, in a bookshelf, those things are always books. There are some people who, don't have a book to their name. God bless them, and their Kindles. They're great people. We love them. It's not me. So I'm going to start with my books. And when I pull my books out, I tend to sort them, because I'm a visual person, I sort them by color. That's how I can find books quickly. So I will remember, oh, I read Motherless Brooklyn. I think it has a grayish blue spine, and that's how I can see it. If that doesn't work for you, that's totally fine. You can use your system, whatever it might be. If you're somebody who, follows things by category, or if you, remember that this was a hardback book and I keep those separate from my softback books, whatever it might be. So I am going to start by putting some books, just like you ordinarily would, on the shelf, and that's a start. But the second step, instead of putting more books and filling the whole shelf, I'm going to do what Jessie suggested and use that kind of sideways book maneuver. So what that gives me is then like a little bit of a blank space. And sorry, when I unmuted, I twisted my camera. Can you guys see? So I twisted sorry about that. There we go. All right. So now I have a little bit of a blank space that I can layer things in down the road. But I'm going to keep going on the books. You have to have your Hamilton. That goes in. That was pandering, by the way. And then in go some other books, and same thing. I'm going to mix the order up so that I have my horizontal books, my vertical books, but I flip-flopped from this shelf to this shelf so that it just stays interesting, and then your eye zigzags through the bookshelf. So that was step 3. We got our books in. Our next step is that we're going to layer in kind of the decorative objects. So I'm going to start at the bottom and just put a picture frame. What I like about it is it kind of all just, it's quiet. If you had a picture that went that way, also cool. Again, it's super subjective. It's just what you like. And then the next spot that I have, so I have this bowl of baseballs. This was a beautiful glass bowl that my husband and I were given for our wedding. Someone on this call may have given it to us. It was, it's beautiful. It's heavy. It's wildly impractical. I can't, serve in it, cook with it, anything. It's, I think, made for trifles. I've never cooked a trifle. But we have a lot of baseballs lying around, and I think as a decorative object, they're beautiful. They have the stitching, and I don't know. I just have always loved baseballs. So my kids will come and they'll grab a baseball out. They'll go play catch in the yard. It's sentimental. It means something to me. So I'm going to throw that up there. And you can see we've kind of left this one, because the glass is clear, the balls are white, you can see through to the back a little bit, and so it doesn't feel heavy. And then in the top, where we have this kind of odd proportion, I'm going to throw some artwork in. I have this ancient history picture of my kids when there were only 2 of them. But the more important part is I have these command strips on the back. So when people hear about putting art in shelves, sometimes they have a little bit of a nervous feeling, like, oh, I don't want to put a nail in. I don't want to ruin my shelves. What if I change my mind later? So we're just going to use these command strips and tack it up, lean it up in our case. So that's there. And you could put this, I liked it off center. You could center it. Again, it's really, you just play with it. And that's the one thing, if you take away from this, is that some of it is just playing. It's taking things on, it's putting things off, it's whatever it might be. And then the last thing, I'm going to put these little guys. These came home. These are, like what Avery said, souvenirs that spark joy. These came back from Beijing with me when I studied abroad. So now we have a few things going on. We have this kind of cluster of 2 guys with 2 kids. That's kind of cute, and there's some repetition that's starting. We have this kind of flow through the shelves of the heavier objects and the more open spaces so that it doesn't feel so heavy. And then the other thing is that designers use as a trick a lot is the rule of 3s. So often, I don't know why, it must have to do with, I don't know, theorems and stuff, but eyes like to see 3 things. So groupings of 3 are always, and odd numbers in general, always just looks lovely. So, and thank you for answering the command strips, whoever just did. So, so we have 1 picture and 2 statues, that's 3. Baseball, book, book, 3, book, book, picture, 3. and 3 shelves, I realized that if you're doing a more standard size shelf, more than just this little small 18-incher, you won't just have 3 things necessarily in every space. But if you keep that idea of clustering of odd numbers, that will help you figure out how it might look and how it might feel and flow a little bit better. So again, these are all principles you can take from a bookshelf. You could do this as an at-home project over the weekend if it's raining, or you could, bring them into your whole house and think about how you're using color intentionally. What the scale of something is. If you have a huge wall over a sofa, you can't put a piece of art that's this big. What the flow and the rhythm is around your space and around your room. So for example, I have this long, tall shelf, but I keep it next to a lamp so that your eye can get up from the shelf and back down over the lamp and onto the next thing. So that's my quick tips and tricks, and I hope that was helpful. Now I think we do questions.
Thanks so much, Carol, as well as Avery. Hugely informative. And we do have a couple other questions. But before we move on to Eric's and Krista's question regarding the command strips, I'm wondering if you have any other sort of tips for using them. I know that there are a variety of products within the command strip family. Any tips?
So these are just the ones for mounting pictures. So they're like Velcro on the back. And so you adhere 2 together on the back of your picture. You press it on a wall. If you're renting, they're fantastic. If you're putting something on a cabinet, they're fantastic. And then you can, sever the picture from the command strip and then open them all up and take them off later. They're a win.
Great. We have a lot of command strip fans in the chat.
I salute you all.
Great. So we have a few other questions that have come in. So first I'm going to ask Eric Christian, who is a Hamilton class of 2023, his question. What is a ballpark price for having someone else come and help organize your house? Is it typically a one-visit situation? So Avery, perhaps a question more aimed at you, but Jessie and Carol, feel free to chime in as well.
So I just, I unmuted myself. Can you hear me? Good. So it varies widely. I will say most organizers charge an hourly rate, and the duration of a project varies tremendously based on what you're executing. Some organizers, if it's a huge project and you're doing a whole house, will actually bring in a team of people to help keep things moving. I tend to, personally, and I know other organizers tend to work with clients when we're working hands-on in 3 to 4 hour chunks, sometimes a little bit longer, but it sort of hits like the peak of productivity and it gives us enough time to get stuff done without hitting sort of decision-making fatigue, which can happen. So I try to cap it at 4 hours, which is usually enough to tackle one small area of a home. So a closet, a pantry, a bathroom, we can usually do in one session. When we get into full rooms, that's usually a couple of sessions, and doing things like a full garage clean out or a basement. If you've been in a home for 20 plus years and you're cleaning out the basement, that's usually can be many sessions, and that's the type of thing when a team might come in so that we can have some people packing stuff up and sorting. But most organizers charge, I would say, and it varies again in the $75 an hour ballpark. Some are less, some are more. It's more if you're working with more organizers. Some do package rates, but most tend to do an hourly rate. That answers the question.
Thanks, Avery. Carol or Jessie, do you want to add to that at all?
On organizing? No. I'll let the expert go.
Great, thank you. Well, we have another question from Krista Campbell, who wants to know and this can go to all of you, or if one person wants to chime in, that's fine too. But how are you thinking of providing services virtually? She recently had an insurance agent use an app called One Experience where she could walk around the house and he could see everything. So are any of you using those types of tools?
Jessie, you want to go?
Sure. I mean, during this whole COVID period, I moved my whole practice remotely. So there are a lot of FaceTime calls, Zoom time calls with clients. It's only been within the last week or two that I've, started to go into clients' homes again, wearing masks here in Massachusetts. But I don't have an interest in using any sort of apps. I feel like I have my client base is all referral. So, I do things locally for the most part. If there happened to be someone on the other side of the country, I think we would operate just having FaceTime or Zoom calls. But I don't know that I'd make use of any other technology than that.
I know some organizers have moved to more virtual work. I've done a couple of virtual sessions even before the pandemic, but it's most of what I do is really, really hands-on, and really kind of physical, and we're in the stuff when I'm working. So for me, virtual sessions, I can sort of get somebody going and provide some tips if we walk around with FaceTime. And but it's most of what I do, and most of the clients who are seeking me out really want the hands-on service. I think most organizers who are seeing people virtually are seeing regular clients who they're sort of just helping with some maintenance. It's hard to sort of start a new project with someone virtually. I also work with people who have sort of physical limitations sometimes, who are not able to execute on their own. So looking forward to being able to get back at it.
Yeah, I'd say I'm much in the same boat. I've done projects across the country. The difference is the hands-on service level. And so it's difficult when you can't, you don't have the local resources, and you don't have the same ability to execute that you would if it's happening locally. For example, like I have a wallpaper guy who I always use here. If I recommend something to somebody in Connecticut, then there are a few more hoops to jump through to make sure that it's done to the specification I want and the way I'd like it. But for clients who are willing to do a lot of the legwork themselves and just want a jumping off place, I think it can be helpful to do virtual work.
Yeah, I'll add that it's best for like one room. Trying to do a whole house or a whole renovation really can't happen virtually. I would say like a one-off living room or a one-off bedroom. As designers too, we then have to rely on the client to take measurements of the space. And we have to also have confidence that the client takes them appropriately, because otherwise, what you may specify for the room may not fit. So there are a lot of things you have to consider if you're not actually physically in the space with the client.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have a question from Siriana from class of 2015. Siriana asks, do you have any recommendations for choosing a coffee table, size, material, etc.?
I'll take that one. So I think it kind of goes back to that self-inventory that you're doing, and like what do you need it to be? For somebody living in a small city apartment, that coffee table probably needs to have some storage. For a young family, maybe you don't want a coffee table, maybe you want an ottoman because you have soft corners that way when kids are learning to walk. And then as you get older, maybe you're more comfortable with, a harder material or something because you're always putting coffee on it or whatever it might be. So I think it's really a personalized thing. Are you a feet on the table person? And these are the kinds of questions that designers ask their clients, like, how do you want to use it? So I think the question is less, what's the right coffee table? But if you can think, what do I want to get out of this piece of furniture? How do I want it to work? How long do I want it to last? Do I want it just to be kind of cheap and cheerful and get me through this next phase of life? Or do I want it to be an investment piece that is going to be something that maybe will end up in someone's garage, but maybe will end up in my granddaughter's house? Those are the kinds of questions that I think everyone needs to think about. So sorry, that was kind of a non-answer answer.
Thanks, Carol. The next question we have is from Rebecca Quinn, whose student is in the class of 2021. She would love to hear any tips Jessie may have about integrating antiques into contemporary spaces and blending in different elements like Eastern themes.
Yeah, I think antiques are a great way to bring history or memories into a space. I think they should usually tend to be more accent pieces. You know, you don't necessarily want to have an antique sofa or an antique chair that you're always going to use, but things that are a table or a storage piece, art, decorative objects. I think it's hard to say exactly how to integrate it, but I think being very selective, like how Avery says, you know, find pieces that you love, maybe whether you inherited it or you found it on your own, things that really speak to you, rather than just accumulating antiques to collect antiques. So I would be thoughtful with it. I don't know if that answers that question, but.
Great, thank you. Ellen Rainey, class of 87, has questions about frames. For anyone that wants to answer, what are your thoughts on framed photos? How many should you have around? Should you rotate the photos in the frames? Does the rule of 3 apply to them? I'm looking at my mantle as I type this, and there are framed family photos, a mantle clock, and a baseball figurine that belongs to my husband. Help. I'm sure a lot of us have questions about frames, something we can all relate to.
So you know, I think you should have memories of stuff that you love around you. And there are a few ways to handle frames. You can do it, you know, as you have been with small mantle frames. One trick that I like to use is buying a standardized frame and gridding it out. So this is really effective in stairwells and foyers. So you can do like a thin black or wood or gold frame, whatever you like, and maybe a thicker mat. One trick is to make everything black and white so that it kind of reads cohesively. Not everybody does that. You can do all sorts of stuff. So I don't think there's, you know, a hard and fast rule about frames in general or having family photos around. I think you should have as many as make you happy. And when you have one more than make you happy, you'll know it. And that's when you should stop. But I do think that, you know, for the mantle, if it feels busy to you, that's a different question. That means maybe you should take some of those frames and put them on a shelf or find a different spot, or maybe get a little console table that you just use to display family photos. That's a nice way to do it if you have the space.
I would just add that sometimes if you don't have a lot of surfaces around your house or shelves, taking the photos off of the mantle and allowing decorative objects or candles or whatever may happen on your mantle be there. And instead of having it on your mantle, create a gallery wall, like find a wall in your house that you walk by all the time, that everyone either visiting your house or your family members can see the photos, and use the wall as the place to display photos.
And don't feel like that wall has to be linear, like explore going up. You know, there are different ways to execute that. But it is a really kind of sentimental, sweet thing to have a whole wall of things that you love and people you love.
I would also say that you don't have to have all the frames be the same. I think that's sort of boring. I think it's nice if you pick maybe a metal, like whether it be brass or if you're doing nickel or something, have that be sort of, I wouldn't mix metals, but you could have different thicknesses, some antique, some shiny. You could have some matted, some not. Also have things that are vertically framed as well as horizontally. And you can also mix in artwork so that it's not just all photos.
Thank you both. The next question we have is from Tara Huggins, class of 2014. And she's wondering if you have any advice for places to buy inexpensive wall art or any ideas for a statement piece above a couch that's in a rental property in particular.
Jessie, do you want to go, or do you want me to take the first pass?
One online source that I really like is actually minted.com. Minted has an excellent source of art, some originals, some prints, some, you know, photography. But I think Minted is great, and they can frame the artwork for you. So I sometimes recommend that to my clients that have a limited budget for art but want some unique pieces. I think that they have a really nice selection. other online sources that I've used are Anthropology Home for, sort of, lower end budget, but, unique pieces. Serena and Lily also has some great artwork on their website.
And
at the sort of middle range.
And if you're going really kind of, cheap and cheerful, you can always do, depending on the style of your house, an engineering print, take a big picture, you have it blown up to an enormous scale at Staples, and you can put it in an acrylic frame that doesn't weigh much, and then it's not so big to hang. The other option is, instead of going big, because big is often more expensive, is to do a number of small, and they can be interesting, they can be varied in height and size. This is something that you can go down a really big rabbit hole on Instagram or Pinterest looking at these pictures, but you can find things even among maybe what you already own that will come together, and you can kind of collage it. I often lay it out on the floor and kind of look at it that way, and just move things and rearrange them, so that when you then put it up on the wall, you know what you're doing. And don't be afraid to use painter's tape to mark stuff out, so that you can kind of, it sounds so silly, I don't know, Jessie, if you do this, but I stand back and kind of tilt my head and blur my eyes, and then you can see if it works or if it doesn't sometimes that way, rather than staring at the specifics.
Yep.
Great, thank you so much. So we have about 5 minutes left in the hour. So at this point, we're going to unmute everyone, and you can ask any final burning questions you have for Avery, Jessie, or Carol.
We answered everything. It's amazing.
Home problem solved.
Right?
I am always up to ask another question if it's available to me. I'm currently sitting in the park, or otherwise I would show you my home, but I have an issue with a landlord who buys bright white lights, and they're horrible, but sorry, it's really windy. My living room is really dark. So as far as more lighting, do you think it's better to have more table lamps, or one floor lamp, or any ideas surrounding lighting in the living room?
So I'm in a
I
room.
think variety is good. I don't know about you, Carol, but
yeah,
I think it
the more
depends.
table lamps, the better.
Yeah.
Make it look like a lamp store. No, it's not quite that serious, but I do think that, I'm in a small room now, and I have, I'll pan kind of fast, this is my messy office, pardon me, but I have, 4 lamps just in one small room. And I think turning that overhead light off gives you more ambiance. It feels a little bit better. But yeah, I think table lamps are your friend, because you can control the wattage. I usually stick with either 2700 Kelvin or 3000 Kelvin bulbs. What he's buying is probably 5,000, the daylight version, which are, for maybe small surgical operations, exciting and good, but for daily living, it's a lot. It's super bright.
Thank you. Well, we just wanted to thank Carol, Jessie, and Avery one more time. We posted in the chat links to all of your social media, your Instagram accounts, as well as, or profiles, I should say, as well as your website. So be sure to check those out. And also be sure to check out the recording for this that will get posted on the virtual events website in the coming weeks. I posted just now the link to that webpage, and it actually has all of our prior virtual events that have been recorded there as well. So if you missed anything or you want to revisit the topics, that's where you can find that information. That said, one final plug, it is reunion weekend virtually, so do register if you haven't. We want to see you who would be celebrating. But thank you again to fellow classmates, Jessie, Avery, and Carol. It's been great. We really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
everyone.
Yeah, thank you. That was